So the Chiefs not only added an intriguing veteran wide receiver today, this makes the wide receiver room even more complex for cutdown day, but they also waived 13 players as the team begins to get the roster from 91, if you count international player Jason Goderick, all the way down to 53 before the end of day tomorrow. Then at least one of the players waived today was a bit of a surprise, so I've got to talk about that and much more. But first, how about those? All right, first up, as most of you know by now, the Chiefs surprisingly signed wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster to a one-year deal this morning. And I say surprisingly because this is largely a time where cuts are made as a team narrows down from 90 players on the roster to 53. But while some moves or additions can happen around this time, normally it's via a trade or a waiver claim after cutdowns. However, KC opts instead to sign a veteran free agent in Juju Smith-Schuster that was just released by the Patriots on August 9th. And trust me, more moves are coming. Tomorrow's cutdown day. A lot's going to happen. Players still could be traded. There's a lot to talk about here. But I will say, when Juju was initially released back on August 9th, I was all for the team bringing him in to at least look at him. Look at his body, his knees. How is he holding up physically? Because if he appeared healthy enough, there's multiple benefits to having Juju Smith-Schuster back. And before I get to what those benefits are, I did want to quickly point out that the Chiefs signed Juju to a one-year veteran minimum deal. He had roughly $7 million fully guaranteed from his deal with the Patriots, so the Chiefs get him for roughly $1.1 million this year. That's a steal for somebody of his caliber. To be clear, though, Juju is not the same player he was in 2022. I get it, but I don't think anybody here in Chiefs Kingdom is expecting him to have the numbers that he had a couple years ago. We'll get to that here in a bit, but Juju's return does have its positives. It also comes with some questions because this now makes the depth guys fighting to make the 53-man roster much less likely to make it in the wide receiver room. The way I see things right now, the definite 5 locks so far are Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Justin Watson, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I do not believe the Chiefs would sign Juju a day before cutdowns if he wasn't a lock. So that now leaves 1 or maybe 2 wide receiver spots open for Sky Moore, Nico Remigio, McCole Hardman, Justin Ross, and Kadarius Toney. I'll share the 2 I think that are most likely to make it here in a moment, but before I do, here are a few benefits that Juju Smith-Schuster brings to the Chiefs wide receiver room. Back in 2022, he largely feasted in the middle of the field, offsetting Travis Kelce, and while his 2023 season was very lackluster due to an ankle injury and an abysmal offense, I mean, New England was an absolute train wreck. He had 1,000 yards in 2022 while in Kansas City, being the Chiefs' leading receiver outside of just Travis Kelce as far as production was concerned. On top of that, Juju was 6th in the NFL with 232 receiving yards after contact that year. So you get a physical-bodied receiver that doesn't have to play a big role on offense. In theory, this will help Juju's body hold up all season long. He can feast in the middle of the field, which means Rashee Rice insurance in case of a suspension, though I really don't think a Rice suspension is happening this year. It also means that Juju is a bit of Hollywood Brown insurance as well. He's not the same type of receiver, don't get me wrong, but KC was definitely going to be using Hollywood in the middle of the field, so Juju can help with that until Hollywood Brown returns. And even if, God forbid, Hollywood deals with more injuries along the way this season, Juju should also be able to integrate pretty quickly into the offense, considering he was just on the team the season before last. Then, if needs be, especially once Hollywood returns, KC could also have Juju fill in for Travis Kelce from time to time, having him line up opposite Rice and run routes in the middle of the field. This would also allow Kelce some rest if needs be in these games. He will still probably play like 90% of the snaps, but he's 35 years old, and while he's historically been pretty healthy, he did deal with injuries last season, multiple injuries to be exact. So if you can help preserve Kelce for the postseason run, that is also a win. Juju is also very QB-friendly against zone coverage, is a solid blocker in the run game. He's 6'1", 216 pounds, and brings plenty of veteran experience into the room. Now, it seems like the team obviously was in favor of bringing Juju back because, voila, he's back, and he impressed enough to pass his physical and for the team to take a chance on him via a vet min deal. But Jason Anderson of Sports Radio 810 had something interesting to share regarding the Juju return. He was told that offensive coordinator Matt Nagy wanted Juju as soon as he was released on August 9th. This isn't specifically connected to a potential upcoming Rice suspension, but Nagy simply had a big say in bringing Juju back to the Chiefs. That also means that Patrick Mahomes also probably wanted him back. They built such a great connection in Juju's one season here, so why not have a guy you can trust return, come back to the fold, rather than taking potential what-if chances on Sky Moore taking a leap this year, or even Kadarius Toney for that matter. And speaking of the bubble guys, with the 5 perceived to be locks now being Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Justin Watson, and now Juju Smith-Schuster, that leaves 1 or 2 spots open unless Hollywood Brown starts the season on the PUP list. I would think the Chiefs would much prefer not to do that, because if they do, that means Hollywood can't return until after week 4. And history has shown that he should, in theory, be back around week 2 or week 3 if you compare his timeline to return to other receivers that have had this injury prior. So that leaves 4 guys or so fighting for the last spot, maybe 2, if the Chiefs roll with just 6 receivers. I have Sky Moore actually being the 6th guy. He's got 2 years left on his rookie deal and basically played 2 snaps on special teams in the last preseason game, while Justin Ross, Kadarius Toney, and Mecole Hardman played a bunch of offensive snaps. Sky could, in theory, be a surprise trade candidate, and that's really the only way I see him not making the 53-man roster at this point in time. I could obviously be wrong. Sky wouldn't be worth much as far as trade value goes, but some team might be interested in this man. Now, the problem with Sky being wide receiver 6 is that there's no real punt return option on the roster. Sure, rookie Xavier Worthy can do it, but with the team seemingly wanting to lean pretty heavily on him as a receiver on offense from the jump, I don't know why they would risk him getting injured by playing special teams. Justin Watson has stood back there in a pinch, but he's a use in case of emergency type of a returner in my opinion. And that's why, as of right now, I think the Chiefs roll with 7 wide receivers, and that 7th guy being most likely Mecole Hardman. Hardman can be the primary punt returner. He can also return kicks. He had a really good kick return one of these preseason games. I can't remember which one. Might have been the last one. 40 or so yards up the field. Then with Hollywood Brown injured, Mecole can fill in as needed as a gadget guy on offense, jet sweeps, could scheme him open. He can also be used to stretch the field. He runs like a 4.33 40. So, while I think Mecole will be the last guy if the team chooses 7 receivers, for what it's worth, Hardman is a vested veteran with over 4 years of playing time in the NFL, so if the Chiefs cut him, he would not have to clear waivers. So you combine that with the fact that, like Juju, he's on a vet min deal. Hardman could find himself in a situation similar to what the team has done with tight end Blake Bell in the past. He doesn't make the initial 53. Then after some moves are made, players shuffled around, etc., he potentially ends up back on the 53-man roster. And the reason why I bring that up is because Kadarius Toney could also possibly make the roster here. Though, I think his chances are lower than Mecole's at this point in time. But Toney is a dangerous returner, and even if that's his primary role for the season, he can be used on offense sparingly if needed, though the thought of that does scare the hell out of me. The difference here is Toney has a cap hit of $2.5 million that remains if he's cut or stays. In theory, if traded, a team would take on his salary, his cap hit, but I really do not believe Toney has any trade value. ML Football does have some agent connections around the league, and he shared today that 10+ teams will show interest in Toney if released. And while I seriously doubt that, I do think another team would give Toney a shot, but I don't know if they would be willing to even trade like a conditional 7th-round pick for him at this point in time. Now, I also realize this has me leaving off Nico Remigio, also Justin Ross, as not making the roster, and while Ross could still make it, I think he has a better chance than Nico. I opted to go with Mecole and then the less likely option of Toney over Mecole due to the team needing a trustworthy punt returner out there. Nico could do it, to be clear, but if you look at the pecking order on when he's been used in preseason compared to others, Nico really seems to be on the outside looking in. And then for Justin Ross, he can't contribute on special teams that way as a returner. So sadly for me right now, Justin Ross is the odd man out. Again, unless something crazy happens with Sky Moore. But that's where I want to pass the question off to you guys. What do you make of the wide receiver room now that Juju Smith-Schuster is back? Do you see them rolling with 6 or 7 receivers? Then who do you think are the last two that makes it? Sky and Hardman, like me? Or do you think Justin Ross somehow makes it over one of these guys? Let me know either way in the comments. Next up, with Juju back in KC, Nate Taylor of The Athletic reported that Juju was indeed out there practicing today, and he was actually seen back in number 9, which is the number he wore for Kansas City back in 2022. Running back Louis Rees-Zammit, though, was previously wearing number 9, but was seen out there wearing number 49 today at practice. Now, that's the number of punter Matt Araiza. So either Matt Araiza is switching numbers, which I would be fine with because 49 for a punter is wild, or LRZ is making a push as the team's go-to punter, not happening, or LRZ is most likely not making the 53-man roster. And I believe the third option is the most realistic, with Rees-Zammit getting waived and most likely ending up on the practice squad. I do think if the Chiefs opt to keep Jason Chu-Godric, their international player that they placed their one exemption on, if he makes the 53-man roster or he gets waived and doesn't clear waivers, I believe KC could possibly place the international player exemption on LRZ, and he would be the 17th practice squad addition. The info on this, though, as far as if you have one placed on one international player, they don't make it, can you place it on another? It's about as clear as mud looking at the rules, so that's currently my best guess. And before I get to the list of players the Chiefs have waived or cut down today so far as they prepare to get them from 91 players, Jason Chu-Godric being that 91st to 53, I did want to touch on some notable players that were practicing today, with one of them being a sigh of relief to see spotted out there working. Those three players were defensive tackle Chris Jones, offensive tackle Wanya Morris, and running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Chris Jones is working back from a shoulder stinger he sustained in the back half of training camp. Should be good to go for week 1, though. And then seeing CEH out there is a positive sign health-wise for him. He practiced much of last week as well, and I think this means his mental health-related PTSD flare-ups and that cyclic vomiting syndrome he's been wrestling through, it appears he's doing better on all fronts, and he most likely makes the 53-man roster because of that, with him practicing last week and today. All signs are pointing to him trending in an upwards direction health-wise. The sigh of relief for me out of all these players, though, is going to be offensive tackle Wanya Morris. He actually went down early in the Chiefs' third preseason game, grabbing at his knee, was then pulled from the game and didn't return. He's not going to be the starting left tackle or anything like that. I mean, Kingsley Suamataia clearly won the job, but Wanya is valuable tackle depth, and to see him practicing already is definitely a positive. I think that there's nothing major going on with his knee. Then Trey Smith and Irv Smith, the Smith brothers, as well as Louis Rees-Zammit, back were limited in practice or left early, but reportedly it was just due to the heat. It was like 100+ degrees today. Very hot, to say the least. Meanwhile, Hollywood Brown's shoulder and cornerback Joshua Williams' hamstring did not practice today at all. And Hollywood's no surprise, but hopefully this Joshua Williams hamstring injury is pretty minor, because KC just waived another cornerback that was in the mix for a spot on the 53-man roster and a bunch of others today, with those being as follows: quarterback Ian Book, wide receiver Kyle Sheets, defensive tackle Alex Gubner, offensive lineman Nick Torres, wide receiver Phillip Brooks, cornerback Kelvin Joseph. More on him in a minute. Cornerback Echo Boydo, cornerback Miles Battle, safety Tyree Gillespie, defensive end Owen Carney, tight end Jorquarius Spivey, offensive lineman Griffin McDowell, and long snapper Randon Plattner. Most of these guys are not a big surprise outside of maybe a couple. And the couple aren't even huge surprises, but it's guys that were possibly making a case for the 53-man roster. Phillip Brooks, the Wildcat, could maybe land on the practice squad as an emergency returner. Miles Battle was an intriguing high upside defensive back that was signed after the draft, but didn't really pop in camp or preseason. Then Jorquarius Spivey, he was just recently added, but had a freaking awesome name, so the best name on the team is now gone. But the real surprise here, or the biggest surprise of the group, is cornerback Kelvin Joseph. Joseph was a guy that climbed his way up the ranks throughout camp and even worked in pretty consistently with the first team defense because injuries hit the cornerback room pretty heavily. However, he himself got hit with the injury bug and missed the last bit of camp, maybe the last third or so. And then he wasn't able to stand out enough during preseason to make it. So the former second-round pick of the Cowboys now finds himself moving on. And he even had a prayer emoji shared earlier today. So hopefully he lands on with another team, or maybe he's on the Chiefs practice squad in case of injuries. You got a lot of injuries in the cornerback room right now, and more could find themselves piling up as the season goes on. So when you look at these moves, plus the addition of Juju Smith-Schuster this morning and the previous waiving of wide receiver Jaron Hayek with the shoulder injury, that now has the Chiefs at 78 players as of when I recorded this video at 5:30 p.m. Central on Monday. But by the end of the day tomorrow, which is, I think, 4 p.m. Eastern, Kansas City and every other NFL team needs to get their rosters down to 53 players. And I will definitely be back tomorrow after all this gets announced, do a video on it, and all that good stuff. So until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?